The artificial lighting of Helix 9 flickered to life, simulating dawn across the orbital station's cramped corridors. Naomi Reeves winced as she pulled herself from her narrow sleeping alcove, muscles aching from yesterday's double maintenance shift. Her quarters, barely 4 square meters of personal space, had once felt like a prison cell. Now, after 5 years aboard the station, it was simply home. She studied her reflection in the polished metal panel that served as a mirror. Dark circles underlined her eyes, and her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical knot. The standard issue jumpsuit hung loose on her frame, stained with hydraulic fluid and marked with the orange identifier band that labeled her as human maintenance personnel. It's property of the Keldron Empire. Status check, she whispered to herself, a ritual that had kept her sane during years of servitude. Temperature, nominal. Cognitive functions intact. Purpose. She paused, allowing herself a small smile advancing. The corridor outside. Her quarters hummed with the station's morning routines. Fellow humans moved with downcast eyes and shuffling steps, conditioned by years of subjugation to minimize their presence. Keldron officers strode past, their metallic exoskeletons amplifying their naturally tall frames to intimidating heights, neural interfaces glowing at their temples. Naomi made her way to the maintenance hub, deliberately taking a route that passed through Section 12 Delta, a restricted area that housed one of the station's primary gravitational nodes. It was her third such accidental intrusion this week. Engineer Unit 7823, a cold voice cut through the recycled air. You have violated authorized pathways. Commander Valens stood at the junction, his exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. The purple ceremonial markings on his elongated face indicated his high rank within the Keldron hierarchy. His neural interface pulsed with a menacing crimson as he assessed her. Apologies, Commander, Naomi replied, lowering her gaze as protocol demanded. The atmospheric recycling system in Sector 8 requires immediate attention. Its route is 15% more efficient. Efficiency is not your concern, Valens said, his multi-jointed fingers activating his command pad. Your function is obedience. 2 security officers materialized from adjacent corridors, their grav batons humming with contained energy. Naomi recognized the familiar prelude to punishment. Take her to the discipline chamber, Valen ordered. Standard correction protocol. The security officers gripped her arms, their enhanced strength making resistance futile, as they marched her through the station. Passing humans averted their eyes, a gesture of self-preservation rather than indifference. The discipline chamber was clinically sterile, designed to maximize the psychological impact of punishment. A floating platform occupied the center, surrounded by observation screens where Keldron officers could witness the proceedings' lessons in the consequences of defiance. Unit 7823 has violated access protocols for the 3rd time, Valen announced. To the gathered officers, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. The Empire's generosity in providing purpose to inferior species requires gratitude expressed through perfect compliance. Lieutenant Terran, standing at the observation deck's edge, watched with an unreadable expression. Unlike most Keldrons, his neural interface emitted a softer blue light, and the ceremonial markings on his face were minimal indicators of his relatively low status despite his officer rank. When the first strike of the grav baton hit her shoulder, Naomi didn't cry. Out. The weapon created localized gravitational distortion, compressing tissue and nerve endings to produce excruciating pain without leaving external marks. The Empire preferred its property undamaged. Through the haze of pain, Naomi focused on the gravitational node visible through the chamber's viewport. Her mind, trained in theoretical physics before the Keldron conquest, calculated field strengths and resonance patterns. Each punishment session provided another opportunity to observe the system and operation data she couldn't access otherwise. Do you acknowledge your transgression? Valen demanded after the 5th strike. Naomi raised her head, meeting his gaze directly, another violation of protocol. I acknowledge gravity, she answered, her voice steady, despite the pain radiating. Through her body, Valen's expression shifted momentarily, confusion replacing his practiced authority. Something in her response had disrupted his expectation of broken submission. "Increase correction intensity," he ordered, but his voice carried a new undertone of uncertainty. As the punishment continued, Naomi's mind remained focused on the equations, forming in her consciousness formulas that would transform Helix 9's power structure as fundamentally as they would alter its gravitational field. The maintenance level buzzed with the nervous energy of whispered conversations. Ezra Penn, his weathered face lined with concern, leaned closer to Naomi as they calibrated an atmospheric filter. At 53, he was among the oldest humans. Aboard Helix 9, having survived 15 years under Keldron rule. "That's the third punishment detail in 2 weeks," he murmured, his fingers methodically adjusting pressure valves. "Whatever you're doing, it's going to get you recycled." Naomi's hands moved with practiced precision, her attention seemingly focused on the filter components. "I'm just doing my job, Ezra." "Bullshit," he replied, glancing nervously at the surveillance nodes embedded in the ceiling. "You're mapping gravitational systems. Jensen saw you in Junction 5 with an unauthorized scanner." She paused, meeting his gaze. "Jensen should mind his own repairs." "We're worried about you," Ezra insisted. "The Keldrons don't just punish individuals, they make examples. Remember Technician Weaver?" Naomi remembered. Weaver had been caught attempting to modify communication protocols. His punishment had been public, brutal, and final. More significantly, his entire work unit had been reassigned to the mining facilities on Keldora's outer moon, a virtual death sentence. "I know the risks," she said quietly. "Do you?" Ezra's voice tightened. "Because you're not just risking yourself." Before she could respond, the ambient lighting shifted to blue, the signal for officer presence. They immediately straightened. Eyes downcast, hands moving in the prescribed maintenance patterns, Lieutenant Taryn entered, his exoskeleton worry softly with each step. Unlike most officers, he walked with a measured pace that didn't emphasize his physical superiority. "Engineer 7823, he said, his voice formal but lacking the usual Keldron disdain. "Your presence is required in Sector 17 for priority maintenance." Naomi nodded, avoiding Ezra's worried glance. Sector 17 housed the primary gravity control systems, an area strictly forbidden to human technicians. As they walked through the corridors, Taryn maintained regulation distance, but his voice dropped to a near whisper. "Commander Valen has ordered increased surveillance on you. Activities have been ... noticed." Naomi kept her expression neutral. "I'm performing my assigned duties, Lieutenant. Are you?" Taryn stopped, turning to face her directly. The blue light from his neural interface cast strange shadows across his angular features. "'Cause your access patterns suggest something more deliberate." For a moment, she considered denial, but something in his expression made her reconsider. "Why are you telling me this?" His multi-jointed fingers tapped a complex pattern on his command pad. The surveillance node above them emitted a soft chirp and rotated away. "You said something during your punishment about acknowledging gravity?" He paused at ... resonated. Naomi studied him carefully. Keldrons weren't known for philosophical discussions with humans. "Gravity is the most fundamental force in our existence," she said cautiously. "It doesn't discriminate between species. Or rank." "No," Taryn agreed, his voice thoughtful. "It doesn't." He reactivated the surveillance node and resumed walking. "The system in Sector 17 requires calibration that Commander Valen believes only you can perform adequately." The rest of their journey passed in silence. But something had shifted between them, a barely perceptible change in the gravitational field of their interaction. Meanwhile, in the command center, Commander Valen reviewed surveillance footage, his neural interface pulsing as he processed the data. "Show me Engineer 7823's movement patterns for the past month," he ordered. The holographic display materialized, showing Naomi's paths through the station. Patterns emerged, seemingly random deviations that, when overlaid, created a comprehensive map of Helixtine's gravitational infrastructure. "She's mapping our gravity systems," his second command observed. "For what purpose?" Valen's elongated fingers traced the pattern. Humans retain the delusion of equality, he said dismissively. They cannot accept their natural place in the cosmic hierarchy. Should we terminate her function? Valen considered this. No, her technical efficiency exceeds standard parameters, and her behavior interests me. His neural interface flashed. Increase surveillance. Monitor all her communications and activities, and schedule another discipline session. I want to see how much pressure she can withstand before breaking. Back. In the human quarters, Ezra gathered with a small group of trusted workers. Naomi's planning something, he told them, voice barely audible over the hum of ventilation systems. Something to do with the gravity systems? We should report her, Jensen said nervously, before they punish all of us. Ezra replied. Firmly, for 5 years, we've survived by keeping our heads down, doing as we're told. What has it gotten us? More work, less rations, and the constant fear of recycling. A young technician named Petra leaned forward. But what could one person possibly do against the Empire? Ezra's weathered face softened. That's what they want us to believe, that we're powerless. But Naomi ... She sees something we don't. She'll get us all killed, Jensen muttered. Ezra acknowledged. Or maybe she'll remind us what it means to be human. As the others debated, Ezra's thoughts turned to the strange interaction he had witnessed between Naomi and Lieutenant Turin. Something about the Keldarin officer's manner had been unusual, almost respectful. In 5 years aboard Helix 9, Ezra had never seen a Keldarin look at a human as anything but property. Perhaps, he thought, the gravity was shifting in more ways than one. The restricted laboratory in Sector 17 hummed with energy as Naomi calibrated the gravitational field sensors. Lieutenant Terran stood nearby, ostensibly supervising but actually studying her with growing fascination. You understand these systems? Better than our engineers, he observed, keeping his voice low enough that the surveillance would not register it. Naomi's hands moved with practiced precision across the control interface. Before the conquest, I specialized in theoretical gravitational physics, she replied, not looking up from her work. Your people didn't bother to check academic backgrounds when assigning maintenance duties. An oversight, Tarian acknowledged. He hesitated before adding one of many. She glanced at him, surprise momentarily breaking her concentration. Keldarins never admitted imperfection, especially not to humans. The Empire's entire societal structure was built on the premise of their biological and technological superiority. Are you helping me? She asked directly. Terran's neural interface flickered as he processed the question. I'm not, he began automatically, then stopped. His elongated fingers adjusted something on his neural interface, dimming its glow. My genetic line is considered ... imperfect. My neural capacity tested at the lower threshold for officer status. Naomi understood immediately. The Keldarin Empire's rigid hierarchy extended even within their own species. Those with enhanced neural capacity commanded. Those with lesser enhancements served. So you know what it's like, she said softly. To be judged by arbitrary standards rather than actual ability. It's not the same, he insisted, but without conviction. Isn't it? Naomi turned fully toward him, abandoning the pretense of calibration. Gravity doesn't care about neural enhancements or species designation. Under its influence, we're all equal. Something shifted in Tarian's expression, a barely perceptible softening of his angular features. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Further, what are you really doing with these systems, Naomi? The use of her name instead of her designation number sent an unexpected warmth through her. In that moment, something changed between them, acknowledgement of personhood, where before there had been only functional recognition. I'm correcting an imbalance, she answered simply. Terrence studied her for a long moment, then made a decision. He removed a data crystal from his exoskeleton and placed it on the console. Security protocols for all gravitational systems, he said, including the override codes. Naomi stared at the crystal, hardly daring to believe what he was offering. Perhaps I want to understand what happens when artificial hierarchies fall away, he replied. When only natural forces remain. Their hands brushed as she took the crystal, the contact brief but electric. For the first time in her 5 years of captivity, Naomi felt something beyond determination or defiance. connection that transcended the rigid structures that had defined their existence. The moment was interrupted by a station-wide announcement. Attention all personnel. Mandatory assembly in the central chamber at next cycle. Attendance is required. Naomi and Taryn exchanged glances, both understanding what this meant. Public punishment. In his private quarters, Commander Valen reviewed the latest security reports with growing irritation. Lieutenant Tareen has spent 43% more time supervising Engineer 7823 than protocol requires. He noted to his second-in-command. Lieutenant Taryn's efficiency ratings remain within acceptable parameters, the officer replied. His neural patterns show irregular activity during these supervisions, Valen continued. And Engineer 7823's work has taken her to 7 different gravitational nodes in the past cycle? Sabotage? Valen's neural interface pulsed as he considered the possibility. Impossible. The systems are secure, and humans lack the neural capacity to override our technology. He paused, his elongated fingers tapping rhythmically on the console. Nevertheless, I want Engineer 7823's associates identified and interrogated. Start with the older one designation 4951 in the maintenance level. Naomi worked feverishly in her private alcove, the data crystal providing the final pieces of her plan. The device she had constructed over months of stolen moments and scavenged parts was nearly complete, a neural interface adapter that would allow her to connect directly with Helix 9's gravitational systems. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. She quickly concealed the device as Ezra slipped into the alcove. They took Jensen for questioning, he whispered urgently. He's not strong enough to withstand interrogation. Whatever you're planning, you need to accelerate it or abandon it. Naomi felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less, Ezra replied. His weathered hand clasped her shoulder. I've lived long enough to know. That freedom always has a price. Whatever happens, I want you to know that you've already succeeded in one thing. What's that? You've made us hope again, he said simply. As he turned to leave, Naomi caught his arm. Be at the mandatory assembly, but stay near the east exit corridor. Spread the word to anyone you trust. When gravity shifts, be ready to move. Ezra nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. As he slipped away, Naomi returned to her work with renewed urgency. The device would be ready and Timit had to be. In his private quarters, Lieutenant Tarrant stood before his reflection, studying the ceremonial markings that designated his rank and genetic line. For the first time, he saw them not as symbols of pride but as brands of conformity. His neural interface pulsed with the command algorithms that had guided his every decision since birth. With trembling fingers, he adjusted the interface settings, reducing the algorithmic influence to its minimum level. The sensation was disorienting, like suddenly being able to hear after a lifetime of silence. He thought of Naomi, of the clarity and purpose in her eyes. In 5 years of enforcing the Empire's will, he had never witnessed such unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming power. It awakened something within him, something the neural algorithms had suppressed but never entirely eliminated. The decision crystallized in his mind with unexpected clarity. Tomorrow, when the artificial gravity of hierarchy confronted the natural gravity of justice, he would stand on the side of natural law. The central chamber of Helix 9 buzzed with tense energy as humans and Keldarans assembled for the mandatory gathering. Naomi stood among her fellow workers, the compact device she had constructed hidden beneath her jumpsuit. Its weight against her skin reminded her of what was at stake. Ezra was noticeably absent. The knowledge that he had likely been taken for interrogation hardened her resolve. Commander. Valen stood on the elevated platform, his exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. Behind him, a holographic projection of the Keldaran Imperator flickered into existence, the Supreme Leader's enhanced features magnified to intimidating proportions. The strength of the Empire rests upon order, Valen began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. Order requires hierarchy. Hierarchy demands obedience. Lieutenant Taryn entered the chamber, taking his position among the officers. His eyes briefly met Naomi's across the crowded space, a silent confirmation that changed everything. He was with her. We have discovered sedition among the human maintenance units, Valen continued. A conspiracy to undermine the fundamental systems of this station. A murmur ran through the assembled humans. Fear, primarily, but beneath it something else, a current of anticipation that hadn't existed before. 2 security officers dragged Ezra onto the platform. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but his back remained straight. He had not broken under interrogation. This unit harbored knowledge of sabotage plans, Valen announced. It protected Engineer 7823 in her efforts to disrupt station operations. Naomi's fingers tightened around the device. The plan had been to wait, to choose the perfect moment when security was minimized. But seeing as we're seeing, the cost of her caution changed everything. The penalty for sedition is termination, Valen declared, to be witnessed by all as a reminder of natural consequence. As the security officers positioned Ezra for execution, Naomi pushed forward through the crowd. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. Valen's neural interface pulsed with surprise and satisfaction. "Engineer 7823, he acknowledged. "You wish to join your collaborator?" "I wish to correct a miscalculation," she replied, stepping into the open space before the platform. With deliberate movements, she removed the device from beneath her jumpsuit. "Restrain her," Valen ordered. But before the security officers could respond, Naomi activated the neural interface adapter. The sensation was overwhelming her consciousness, suddenly expanding to encompass the entire gravitational system of Helix 9. She could feel every gravitational node, every field generator, every subtle fluctuation in the forces that held the station together. With a thought, she neutralized the artificial gravity throughout the central chamber. Chaos erupted as humans and Keldarans alike found themselves suddenly weightless. The security officers, their movements hampered by their heavy exoskeletons, flailed helplessly. Commander Valen grabbed a support rail, its expression transforming from authority to disbelief. Only Naomi remained grounded, the device creating a localized gravitational field around her body. She moved with purpose toward Ezra, who was floating, free of his captors. "What have you done?" Valen demanded, his voice stripped of its commanding tone. "Restored natural law," Naomi answered. "In zero gravity, there is no hierarchy, only adaptation." Lieutenant Terran activated his exoskeleton's emergency thrusters, propelling himself to Naomi's side. "The humans in sectors 3 through 7 are already moving to secure essential systems," he reported. "The plan is working." Valen's neural interface flashed crimson with rage. "Traitor," he spat at Terran. "Your genetic line was always suspect. This deviation proves the flaw in your coding." "No," Terran replied calmly. "It proves that consciousness transcends coding." Naomi extended her hand to Ezra, pulling him into her localized gravity field. "Are you all right?" The older man nodded, his one good eye gleaming with something approaching. "You actually did it," he whispered. "You changed the gravity." Around them, the dynamics of the central chamber were transforming. Humans, more adaptable in zero gravity than the exoskeleton-dependent Keldarans, were gaining control of the situation. Some had already secured the weapons dropped by floating security officers. "This is temporary insanity," Valen declared, still clinging to the support rail. "The Empire will send forces. This station will be sterilized." "Perhaps," Naomi acknowledged. "First, we're going to have a conversation about natural forces." She adjusted the device, creating a bubble of gravity that encompassed Valen, pulling him toward her with irresistible force as he drifted helplessly toward her. Their positions reversed for the first time since the conquest. Naomi saw something she had never witnessed in a Keldaran face before: fear. Terran moved closer to her, his hand brushing against hers in the weightless environment. The contact was brief but charged with meaning acknowledgement of a connection that transcended biological differences and social hierarchies. "The station's communication systems are under our control," he informed her. "We've established contact with resistance cells on 3 other Keldaran outposts." Naomi nodded, feeling the weight of what they had begun. This was no longer about personal freedom or revenge. It was about fundamental change, about challenging the artificial gravity of empire with the natural gravity of equality. As commander, Valen floated before her, powerless without his gravitational advantage. Naomi felt no triumph, only clarity. "Now," she said quietly, "we're going to discuss a new equilibrium." 30 days after what was now called the gravity shift, Helix 9 operated under a fundamentally transformed order. The central chamber, once the site of public punishments, had been converted into a governing council hall, where representatives from both species worked to forge a new society. Naomi stood at the observation viewport. Watching the gas giant, they orbited complete another rotation. The swirling storms on its surface reminded her of the ongoing turbulence of their revolution, beautiful, chaotic, and impossible to fully control. "The supply vessels from Outpost Zenith arrived safely," Terran said, joining her at the viewport. Without his exoskeleton, now a choice rather than a requirement, his natural frame was less imposing but more graceful. The neural interface at his temple had been modified, the imposing crimson glow replaced by a subtle blue pulse. "Any word from the Empire?" Naomi asked, though she already knew the answer. "Their ultimatum remains unchanged, and all humans aboard or face orbital bombardment." His elongated fingers intertwined with hers, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 2 months ago. "The defense systems you modified should give us adequate protection," Naomi nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The modified gravity fields created a shield of distorted space around Helix 9, but it was untested against military assault in Valen. Terran's expression tightened, still refusing to acknowledge the Council's authority. "Some of his loyalists attempted to access the communication array last night. Successfully? No. Petra's security protocols held." He hesitated, before adding, "There are calls among some humans for more permanent solutions to the Keldaran resistance." Naomi understood the sentiment. After generations of oppression, the desire for retribution was natural. "Revenge has its own gravity," she said quietly. "Too hard in that direction, and will collapse into the same black hole of hatred that created the Empire." The council chamber doors slid open, and Ezra entered. His face had healed, though a scar now curved beneath his right eye, a permanent reminder of the cost of change. "The agricultural section reports successful germination of the first crop," he announced. "Will be self-sufficient in basic nutrition within 60 days? Good," Naomi replied. "That gives us more flexibility in negotiations." "Negotiations?" Ezra raised an eyebrow. "With the Empire?" "With reality," she corrected. "We can't hide forever, and we can't fight the entire Imperial fleet. We need a sustainable solution." The three of them moved to the central planning table, where a holographic model of the station rotated slowly. Around them, humans and Keldarans worked side by side, some still awkwardly. Centuries of conditioning not easily overcome, but with growing understanding. "The modifications to Living Section 3 are complete," Terran reported, highlighting a portion of the hologram. "The environmental controls now accommodate both human and Keldaran physiological requirements." Naomi nodded, studying the modifications. The practical aspects of creating a truly integrated society were often more challenging than the ideological ones. Different atmospheric preferences, different gravitational needs, different nutritional requirements each had to be addressed for coexistence to work. "Have you had any success with the neural recalibration program?" she asked Terran, his fingers traced the interface at his temple. 7 officers have voluntarily undergone the procedure. They report increased autonomy of thought, though the process is ... disorienting. The neural interfaces that Keldarans relied upon had been designed not just to enhance their cognitive abilities, but to enforce conformity to Imperial doctrine. Removing those constraints without damaging their enhanced capabilities had been one of Terran's primary focuses. A soft alert chimed from the communication console. Priority message from Commander Valen announced the operator, a young human named Dax. "Put it through," Naomi authorized. Valen's face appeared on the main display. Even in detention, he maintained the rigid posture of Imperial authority. "The Council experiment has had sufficient time to demonstrate its inevitable failure," he stated without preamble. I am prepared to discuss terms for resumption of proper order. Naomi exchanged glances with Taryn and Ezra. This was the first time Valen had initiated communication since his detention.
What terms? She asked cautiously.
Amnesty for the human instigators, reassignment rather than recycling, and ... He paused, the words clearly difficult for him. Advisory positions.
For qualified humans in station operations, the offer hung in the air, a remarkable concession from someone who had previously viewed humans as little more than biological tools. But it was still predicated on a return to Keldron authority. The time for that kind of hierarchy is past, Commander Naomi replied. Ash! But I appreciate the evolution in your thinking. Perhaps you'd be willing to meet with the Council to discuss a truly collaborative model. Valen's neural interface pulsed with what might have been frustration or calculation. The Empire will never recognize such an arrangement. Perhaps not. Today, Taryn interjected. But the Empire is not monolithic. There are factions already questioning the sustainability of the current system. After Valen's image disappeared, Naomi turned to Taryn. Their relationship had developed in the crucible of revolution, a connection forged through shared purpose and mutual respect that had gradually evolved into something deeper. Do you think he's sincere? She asked. Taryn considered this. In his way, the foundation of his reality has shifted. He's attempting to find stable ground. Aren't we all? Ezra commented wryly. Later, in the quiet of their shared quarters, Naomi and Taryn stood before the viewport, the gas giant's swirling storms casting ever-changing patterns of light across their faces. His elongated fingers traced the line of her jaw with gentle curiosity, still learning the contours of her humanity. When I was first assigned to Helix 9, Taryn said softly, I was told that humans were intellectually limited, emotionally unstable, and biologically inferior. Naomi smiled. And now I understand that diversity of form doesn't indicate hierarchy of value. That consciousness, whether housed in your biology or mine, seeks the same fundamental things: connection, purpose, understanding. She leaned into his touch. The initial strangeness of their physical differences long since transformed into appreciation for their complementary nature. A new equilibrium, she murmured. Not perfect, Taryn acknowledged. There will always be forces pulling in different directions, but perhaps that tension itself is what creates a stable system, like the gravitational interplay between celestial bodies. Outside their viewport, the first ships of the Imperial Response Fleet appeared. As distant points of light against the void, whatever came next, negotiation, resistance, or some yet unimagined path, they would face it together. Bound not by the artificial gravity of empire, but by the natural gravity of connection. In the station's botanical section, first seeds of Earth's plants were pushing through the soil, tentative, vulnerable, but alive with potential. Like Helix 9 itself, they were finding their way toward the light, defying artificial constraints to follow the natural laws written into their very being. The revolution had begun with gravity, but it would continue with growth,